New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Good morning, everybody. Mark Gilbert here with you again for our ongoing series on where we're exploring on Saturday mornings the Science of Mind textbook by Ernest Holmes. I am here with my coffee and I'm also awake and raring to go to share with you some discussion regarding one of the sections of the book. I just want to say hello to everybody. And as you sign in, and I'll say this several times, knowing that people come in a flow basis, just be sure to check in and drop a little comment there and say what your name is and where you're from. And good morning, Shay. Michelle Davis from Colorado. I'm from Colorado as well, so we're probably not too far from one another. Anybody else who's joining in, be sure to check in and let us know that you're here. We look forward to hearing from you. And as always, we want this to be a dialogue. We want this to be an opportunity for you to share your questions, your comments, and things as we go through this chapter this morning, things that come up for you, questions that come up for you, anything that you feel like you want to share, be sure to drop that in the comment area and we'll get it on the screen and if it can fit in, and I'll address it if it has a question and so forth to it. We're coming to the end of this. This is the third year now where New Thought Media Network has done these Saturday morning conversations built around the Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes. And this is I have several copies of it, but this is my working copy where I mark it up, and you can see it's been used quite extensively through the many years. But hopefully you've got your copy too. We're going to be looking at a section called the General Summary in just a moment. But I wanted to mention the fact that, again, it's the third year that we've gone through this, and what we've done is started in January and moved through all of the key chapters all the way to the General Summary section. We're actually doing the General Summary twice. So I'm doing it today, and there's so much content in it, and maybe from a different lens, different perspective. Reverend Robert Brzezinski will be with you next Saturday and going through the General Summary as well. So maybe I'll get to all of it, maybe not. We'll just see how the dialogue goes. And also, we will be I always say this: whatever I don't cover, Robert will, and however even if I get to the whole summary, Robert's going to cover it from a different perspective, because we always bring our own consciousness and our own background and lens to anything that we're looking at. So just knowing that, Hopefully you get something today. You'll get something different next week. And then after that, we're going to start what we did last year. We're going to start through a series of looking at other Science of Mind writings with a key focus on the Science of Mind archives and documents and books and writings of Ernest Holmes that are available through that online resource. And so we're going to be encouraging you to become a website subscriber or friend of the archive over the rest of the year and pick up some of the materials that we'll be talking about on upcoming Saturdays through the rest of the year. It's much like what we did last year as well. So we come to the conclusion of the textbook. It's not so much really the conclusion, though. There are sections after this general summary. There's sections where Ernest got into a discussion of the Bible and how the Bible relates to science of mind and taking Bible passages and relating them to the philosophy of science of mind. And then there's a whole section on meditations, prayers, and such that you can read through that give you ideas of how to use the science of mind. And then there's charts and diagrams and other appendices that give you other information. All of that doesn't necessarily lend itself to coverage like we do in these programs each Saturday morning, but hence we're going to the other content. But just know there's all that other material back there as well. And hopefully you've enjoyed going through this. And all of the videos from all the prior weeks, of course, are out on YouTube. And you can go to the New Thought Media Network YouTube page and look up the playlist for the Saturday morning Science of Mind conversation series and go back and review any of the ones from the prior year. It's a good way to help you deepen your studies of science of mind. If you're reading a particular chapter and you're wanting to know what was discussed on that, there's a repository of video content of one of our teachers going through that particular chapter with you, and you can go back and access that as well. But let's get into the content today. And again, if you're just signing on, I want to be sure that you drop your name and where you are coming from or where you are in the comment field so we know who all is here and we can interact with you. And as we go along, I'm going to stop and ask some questions because I do want to hear from you and get your questions and comments. So be sure to let us know that you're here. So with that said, let's dive in and let's get some slides up here on the screen. Yeah, we're calling this Putting It All Together because putting it all together really is about putting all of the content of the rest of the book into one general section. And if you've heard any of my prior presentations this year, you probably know that I always point out that there's a general flow to the Science of Mind textbook, which may not always be evident to the first-time reader. And the flow is this. Holmes starts with a general overview of the theory of science of mind through the first parts of the book, and then he converts and starts talking about how to practically use the philosophy in your life. So we move from the theory to practice. And then there's a third section where he really gets into the mystical content, the mystical ideas of science of mind, taking everything from the practical side where you're using it in your day-to-day life and going a little bit deeper with it. And that's really what a lot of what the flow is. And in fact, as we look at this final conclusion, general summary and final conclusion of the book, which are on the pages 390 to 423, you'll see that it's done the same way. There's an overview of this entire book in this one section. And in fact, you can reference that later if you want by looking at the, either writing that down or coming back and looking at the video of it. But if you go through pages 390 to 395, that's where he's really talking about the theory. Around 396, he cuts over to how to use it. And then he gets into the advanced mystical type concepts starting in 410 and moving forward. And I want to talk about 15 key points that I think he makes in this particular summary. 15 key points. And I'm going to go through these key points, but they are in that order of theory and then how to use the philosophy and then getting into some of the mystical stuff. And more of the key points in the first couple than the last one. But I got to say that whoever is reading this, anytime you're reading something, we bring our attention and focus when we're looking at it. And it's me, Mark, who when he reads the overview or reads the general summary, I come up with my 15 key points. You would probably read it and might come up with slightly different key points in the chapter. But I want to at least throw these out for you to contemplate and think about and help guide you through looking at this particular particular overview. So what we're doing in very few minutes is giving you a complete overview of the science of mind in some regard. And we start by that with the very first point, which is that all is mind. Everything is mind. And we've got to let go of the old concept that mind is this thing that sits in the skulls of our head, that mind is limited to people. And that's a common thing that people have when they walk around in life, is you look at other people and think, oh, his mind, her mind, their mind, we see minds as being located in the skulls of people around us, and thinking that our mind is something that's contained within the brains of our own bodies. But what science of mind teaches is that everything is mind, that we're actually living and moving and having our being in mind with a capital M. So the little use of our mind, if you're reading Holmes, will be with a smaller m. The individual use of mind is written with a little M-I-N-D. But when they talk about big mind, or all is mind, mind with a capital M, we're talking about the energetic field of God that we're all moving and living and having our being in. And so that's the very first point, is that we've got to shift our focus towards seeing that we live and swim and have our being in an ocean of mind, God, spirit, infinite intelligence. Those are all synonyms. They're all synonyms. They're all words to use the same thing. You can use God or spirit, and many people use mind or infinite intelligence. This is on page on the 390, the very first page of the general summary. Holmes writes, the mind of God is infinite. He also writes, spirit is really the only mind there is. And on the next page, God is spirit, that is without parts, a universal unity and wholeness. God is mind. God is mind. And so we're starting off with this concept that we are just pockets of consciousness within the big mind of God. That's the very first concept being presented, and one that we have to wrap our minds around. The second point is that our mind, what we call our mind, is really the use of this one mind. And that is the key focus of science of mind. Mind is getting to that concept of how we can use the mind that we're living and moving and having our being in. And so when we practice techniques, as we'll get into in a few seconds, about using our mind, we're using this one mind. Holmes says this. He says the conscious mind of man is that part of or unity with the supreme spirit, which enables man to be an individual unit, separate in identity without becoming separated from the whole. So he's saying we're individual, but we are, it's our use of this one mind that makes us unique and special. At point 3, which I just sort of hit on in that last quote, is that we all are individualized expressions of the one. If everything is one and everything is interconnected, we walk around with a sense that we're separate and apart from everything. We have this sense that I'm Mark, you're who you are. Everyone has the sense that you are what your name is and what your story is. And we have these stories that we tell ourselves about this individual person that we are. And you'll notice that I put in quotes the word individualized. That's because Holmes uses that word. And I think one of the reasons he uses, sometimes he uses these sort of like made up or words that are a little bit different from us, is he wants to highlight a key point about it. When he says that we are individualized expressions of the one, he could have said we are individual expressions of the one. But to say that we are individual leads us with this connotation that we're individuals, rugged and separate and apart from one another. And what he wants us to see is that we're not really true individualized. We're individualized expressions, that we are having this sense of being individualized, but we're actually part in the vast oneness. We're part of spirit, we're part of God, we're part of the all of oneness. And so he writes, without this conscious mind of man, in an individualized state, God or the spirit would have no independent offspring. Therefore, God would not be completely expressed. So we are, in a sense, an expression of the divine, expressions of God. Point 4 is that mind can be used or experienced either consciously or subconsciously. And then I'm saying also known as subjectively. Now, scholars can probably argue a little bit of a difference between subconsciously and subjectively, but for the most part, for our common understanding and for the use of understanding science of mind, we can consider them almost synonymous. That there's two aspects to this usage of mind that we have. we have this aspect that is consciousness. You can think about this in the moment. Think about your thinking. Think that you're listening to me, you're listening to this video or whatever, and there's this conscious awareness that's going on. And you're listening to me, but you're also thinking about other stuff. So all those thoughts that are flowing through what we call that stream of consciousness in our life, that is our conscious awareness. And that's the area where we can think about our thinking, where we know we're thinking and we can maybe have a different thought. But there's a subjective aspect to consciousness as well. And it's below the level of conscious awareness. And it's the parts of our conscious bodies, because everything is mind. Every cell in our body is filled with mind or consciousness. Every cell that is functioning and doing things automatically for us, keeping our heart beating, our lungs breathing, and the flow of blood around our bodies, and all of that aspect of it is happening subjectively without our conscious awareness in it. It's happening in the subjective mind, below the level of awareness. But also in that level are all the memories and repositories of every thought we've ever had. Everything that we think about goes into the subjective mind, and also all the thoughts of everyone else. Carl Jung, famous psychologist, he popularized the idea of the collective unconscious. And it's a similar concept to what Holmes was saying, and many New Thought teachers say, is that all of our thoughts and all the thoughts of humanity are collected in something. Now, Holmes used the words race consciousness to differentiate this, but we can also think it as the collective unconscious, that there is this body of all of the thoughts of everyone through all time and everyone currently that sits in the subjective, and it also impacts us. So we have these thoughts that are not below the level of awareness that come from not only ourselves but other people, and all the workings of the automatic stuff below the level of what we need to know. And the only thing that's in our conscious awareness are thoughts that are needed for guiding our lives, and that we can interject new thoughts into that process. But what I want you to anchor into the fact is we have these two levels of awareness in our minds, and that the subconscious or subjective has a different idea for it. And that gets to point 5, which Holmes talks about, that our subjective mind, what we think is our subjective mind, is universal. That is, it is interconnected with every other subjective mind. The subjective is all one mind. Well, everything is one ultimately, but where we really sense our sense of separation, or our sense of being an individual or individualized, is in that state of conscious awareness, where we know that we know, and we have our thoughts. But below that level, and the area that we're not consciously thinking about, is that area of the subjective where everything is flowing and interconnected in a oneness. So it's universal. And that's how the subjective mind and thoughts of others, the so-called race consciousness, can impact us. It's because it's there in our subjective. And you can also see that the other point here is, not only is it universal, it's creative. Subjective mind is where our mind flows through some sort of creative field and does something. And we can think about that from the sense of our bodies again, that the consciousness that is in our cells, that keeps the blood pumping or the lungs flowing, manifests that action. It's continuously manifesting that action. So the subjective has the ability to make things creative. This was often discovered back in the 1800s with the idea of hypnotism or mesmerism, and the workings of Phineas Quimby, who they first found the concepts of mental healing, and the fact that by consciously thinking something and through the subjective medium, the aspects, we could have subjective thoughts entered into our subjective minds and impact our bodies. And that's how mental healing first came about, and how with things like the placebo effect these days work, is the very fact that you're taking a pill actualizes your acceptance or belief that healing is going to occur. And there's always people who get healed just by the very nature of taking the pill, because they believe it. What's happening? The belief is flowing through their subjective consciousness and leading to the healing that they're desiring. And that's the basic flow of what happens when we can get to the point of believing that our affirmative prayers and our changing our thinking is working as well. So I've run through 5 points real quickly, and these are all theory. You'll notice that, again, the flow is theory, how to, and the mystical. But the theory is the first few sections, and hopefully this is raising some questions. Again, I want to stress that if you are on the call and you haven't checked in by dropping your name and location in the comment field, please do so we can Celebrate that you're here with us this morning, and also open the dialogue with you so that if you've got any questions about any of this stuff. So everything is mind. What we think is our mind is just our use of the one mind. That we are individualized expressions of the one mind, and that our mind has two aspects to it. Has a conscious aspect and a subjective or subconscious aspect, and that our subconscious or subjective aspect is both universal and interconnected with all of the subjective, and it's also the creative medium that acts upon our thoughts to create and manifest in the world of form. So hopefully this is giving you a good review from all the stuff from the prior weeks. All right, let's continue on here with point 6, and this is probably one of my favorite ones, and I may delve into this a little longer. But mind exists on a continuum from unformed substance, spirit or the absolute, to denser forms, body, matter, or the relative. Let's maybe look at a quote from Holmes on this particular point. There's a bunch of them actually on 392 and 393. And here's where you're going, my gosh, we're almost through this, only into the third or fourth page of this summary. And we are running out of time if we don't jump to all of the others. Most of the content and ideas and most of the theory is in the first few pages. And a lot of that becomes just the elaboration on the how to and the mystical. And if you can lock down your understanding of the first few pages, I think that you get a basic good understanding of science of mind and the philosophical underpinnings of it. So here's what Holmes says on page 392. The universal subjectivity, which is our subconsciousness, the universal aspect of it, is mind in an abstract and formless state. A formless state. What does he mean by that? Well, things that are around us, like, your computer, this camera, my table here, my telephone sitting here, all of this. This is form. Me, I'm form, you're form. This manifest physical world is the denser aspect of the one. We call it body, matter. It's also referenced as the relative. This is because we exist in relation to one another. So the relative is really a field where we are relating as these individualized expressions. So we are relative. Okay. But on the other hand, there is beyond the world of form, in the world of the non-material, there is mind, God, spirit, the ultimate, the absolute. And Holmes often talks about the absolute to the relative, the absolute being that highest level of the non-physical realm, and then the relative being the world of form that we live in. Okay. He also says on this page, the universal mind is contained the essence of everything that ever was, is, or shall be. That is, every form that's ever existed is just a formation temporarily of something in this denser form that can exist outside the realm of form in its true, more natural state. He writes on the next page, the invisible essence of mind is substance. The invisible essence of mind is substance. That is an unformed stuff, an energy plus intelligence. Now, you can think back to Einstein's, famous equation: energy equal mass times, squared to a constant. And but what Einstein is saying in that equation is that there is an interplay between energy and matter, that there is a non-formed substance on one side of his equation, and there's stuff, physical stuff, on the other, and that there's a continuous flow between the two. That was shown by Einstein, is that there's matter flows in and out of states of form that are measurable as matter, and then into a non-formed state. And that's what Ernest Holmes was teaching as well here, that that we live in two realms at once. And so you'll notice that I put on this slide that we exist on a continuum. And what I want you to get in your mind is that every day we knock around in this physical world thinking we're separate and apart from everything. But our true reality is in the non-physical realm. And you can sort of think about it that everything is on a vibration scale. one way of looking at it, and Holmes used this kind of analogy too, is that we're like radio frequency gatherers, and you can imagine that you as a human being have an opportunity to turn a dial on a radio and turn your frequencies up and down as to what you're tuning into. When we are at our furthest away from spirit, when is that? When we are so immersed that everything out there in the world is all it is, and we get sucked up into the stories of our life. Or you can look at it from a standpoint of the consciousness of a rock or minerals or things of that nature. They are very dense, slowly vibrating forms. But the more that we become in tune with the infinite spirit of who we are, our divine mind, the oneness, the more we do that, we vibrate at higher and higher levels. At a certain point, the vibration transcends the world of form, the world of physical stuff, and it gets into the world of the non-physical stuff. You every moment have an experience of the non-physical by the very nature of your thinking. When you are thinking, where are your thoughts? Again, our mental aspect of being immersed in form or this world, physical world, wants to say, oh, they're just firing of neurons, et cetera, et cetera. What I want you to think is that we really don't know where the consciousness comes from. Yeah, we can track the firing of neurons and make correlations between brain firings and certain conscious states, but no one knows how to explain the leap between the physical neurons in the brain and our expression and experience of the consciousness that's in us. And so much of consciousness transcends the physical. That's what I want you to see. Much of our emotions transcend the physical. There are aspects of our everyday experience that are not anchored in our physical. They may react to our physical, but they're beyond the physical. So you live in the world of the mental and the world of the physical every day. And the more you're in the mental world, the world of thoughts and consciousness, the more you're closer in those higher vibrations. And when the more you can tap into the higher vibrations beyond that, you move closer to your true essence, which is the nature of spirit or oneness or God or spirit. Okay. The more you know that you are one with all, the more you feel that mystical union with all, the more you're vibrating at the highest frequencies. But every day we move along that continuum. Every day we get immersed and sucked into stories that are going on in our lives. And then we may sit on the meditation cushion or go into nature and feel that we're closer to the divine. And we turn our frequency dials all the time up and down this continuum. And so this is the point that Holmes wants us to see, is that we live in these two realms. And and there's an interplay between them. There is an interplay between them. So hopefully you can start looking at your life in that sense where you see your physical nature, but you know you're also more. That your real spiritual truth is in the oneness of being. Okay. All right, let's move to the next point. Forms are not permanent, only temporary states where mind is expressing itself. Key idea here is that God, spirit, mind needs a playground to express itself, to express its creative abilities. And it does that through us. And it puts us out in the world of form and gives us the freedom of free will choice and the ability to make choices and also to forget that we're one with all that is. So we can feel immersed in this and feel that we're separate and apart from one another because we have free will. But the more that we feel connected to the one, the more that we feel our inner sense of interconnectedness, the more we get freedom from the bondage that comes by thinking we're separate and apart from one another. But what is important in this point to recognize is that everything that we think is permanent and physical is just a temporary state where the liquid nature of big mind has flowed into and formed itself into some temporary physical form. And that's just the nature by which spirit is expressing itself. It's expressing itself as these books back here, this camera here, you and me, these glasses. Everything is temporary expression of spirit. Okay. And it's all just for the creative ability for spirit to experience all of the nature. Spirit is a rock, spirit is a plant, spirit is an animal, spirit is you and me, spirit is even higher realms beyond us. Once we can see that the temporary forms are just temporary expressions of spirit, that changes our perspective on how we look at life. Okay. So that point, let's see if I can give you a quick quote. This is again on the bottom of 393. He says, no form is permanent. All forms return into the formless. The formless is eternal. All form is temporary. Beautiful, beautiful. Let's get to the next point. Again, if you have a comment or question, I would love for you to jump into the dialogue, even though I seem to be like running the train, running through all these points. And I said there were 15, and you may not want to stop me. I don't care if you do. If you've got a question or a comment, go ahead and jump in. I can get wound up on this and keep going. And hopefully you're getting something from it and benefiting from something from it. And it's giving you a good reminder of what you've learned through going through all these Saturday mornings. All right, point 8. The science of mind is about learning to use the creative power of our thoughts to consciously use our subconscious mind. That is, how to bring unformed substance into form. We're still working in the theory here, but we're coming down to the sort of a switch towards the how-to. But what I want you to get the sense of is that once you understand this theory, that we're on this continuum between form and the formless, between the relative and the absolute, between the world of the physical and God or spirit on the other end. That when you recognize that we are on this continuum or this arc, and that we're playing in both realms or along the continuum all the time, sliding up and down into different areas of this continuum, the more that you recognize, well, maybe if there is an interconnection between these two, maybe there's a way that I can direct what forms are created. And that's what Science of Mind gets at, is the fact that if we can use to learn the creative power of our thoughts, again, conscious thoughts flow through the subjective, the creative medium. The more we can consciously train our thoughts, the more that we can have outcomes and experiences in this world of form that are to what we desire. And so the whole idea behind Science of Mind is to use the science, the techniques, and testing for yourself, the method that we can change our conscious thinking, and through that conscious thinking now flowing through the subjective creative medium, create a different form, because all these forms are temporary. Welcome, Mitch Austin. He says, our bodies are made of God stuff. Why do we get sick? Good question. Well, there is this aspect, and we could add in, when we put the word sick there, we could add, why is it that we suffer on anything in life? Why is it that we feel like we're poor or have no friends or don't have love relationships or whatever it is that we are desiring to experience? Our true nature in spirit is health, wholeness, prosperity, abundance. But if our thinking has been, and that includes our acceptance of that collective subjective thinking, because remember, the subjective is of everyone. There's several things going on at the same time. One may be you've been, and every situation is different, but I'm going to give you a few examples just to sort of give you an answer to the question. We get sick because our thoughts aren't in alignment with our health. That's the short answer. But you may think your thoughts are. You may think, I'm affirming every day that I'm healthy, that I'm physically fine, that this pain I feel in my leg is gone today. You're affirming that and affirming that and affirming that. But there's several things that are going on that can counteract that. One is that we have to train our thoughts to be consistent. And oftentimes, as much as I can affirm something, if my experiences that I'm currently getting aren't in alignment with what my thoughts are, those can sometimes also muddy our thinking. So I can think I have no pain in my leg, and then I'm suffering through walking around with a pain in my leg, and I focus on the pain in my leg. Those thoughts about the pain in my legs are now mixed with thoughts that there is no pain in my leg, and what I do is I end up experiencing, the pain, because I have mixed thoughts going on. So inconsistent thinking is one. The other is that at the subjective level, in our prior, we have years of thinking that my family is prone to getting whatever X disease it is. If that's been trained into you for so many years, that pattern is hard to overcome with just, if you've thought for years and years and years, you're always going to get a certain illness. And then you find these techniques and you start using them to reorient your thinking. Well, you have to sort of rethink also all that subjective stuff that's been in the collective. And the collective thinking of the planet says that, we're all going to get, some disease like COVID or whatever, then that subjective has an impact on us as well, you know? And so it's hard for us to sometimes and this is one of the biggest, I think, somewhat one of the biggest areas where people, um, they think that my thinking, the thinking in my head is the only thinking that's impacting the manifestation of my body or my state of affairs. And they forget about the years of their own thinking. They forget about the times they're inconsistent in their thinking. They forget about the mind containing thoughts from the collective, including the collective historically for many, many years around a belief on that. And sometimes it's very hard for us to shift a pattern immediately. And it's hard for us when we don't get immediate results. Sometimes we can, feel like, oh, this crap doesn't work, you know. Mitch is asking, so did I think myself into the physical? Also the conditions I was born into, body, family. That's a great question. It's a long answer to it. I will say I don't know on some level. I don't know did you think yourself into the physical? I truly believe that there is a continuation of our consciousness, that there was a Mitch and a Mark before we were born on the planet that came into and was maybe expressing in some form before that. What Holmes teaches is that when we pass from here, our consciousness and that individualized nature that we know as ourselves transcends the third dimension into higher dimensions. We move into higher states of being. Now, many people believe in reincarnation, that we cycle through the physical world in the same individualized expression. And that could be true. I think many people, and my personal belief is even though Science of Mind doesn't teach reincarnation, Holmes didn't believe in reincarnation. I think many people in the philosophy are open to the idea that possibly we are reincarnated beings coming back in continuous states. So in some level, maybe that reincarnated state thought yourself into the physical. But at some point, we don't want to be limited by only being in the physical, that we want to, we transcend here. That we're not only going to cycle here, but we're going to, in a sense, complete our time here. And that's what I truly believe. I think at some level, we move on from here into higher states of being and higher states of consciousness. And we carry with it Mitch and Mark and whoever you are into your own next level of being. So I think in some regards, there is some sort of sense that we did think ourselves in. But I think ultimately the thinking also can come from the divine, God, Spirit. Spirit created us in regard. So the word or thought of God created us into being and embedded itself into us. But it also allowed us to forget that we came from God. So when we say our thinking is also all thinking on some level. And the thinking of God created you. At some point, when did the thinking of God meld into the individualized thinking of Mark or Mitch? Don't know. It's a good question. But at some point, when we were born onto the planet, we thought we were individuals and different. So somewhere before then, Shay writes, Shay Michelle Davis, thank you for being here. 6 explains duality and mood swings, closer to the divine and further away. Yeah, let's go with that 6. We'll go back. The continuum. Yeah. It explains a lot. And there's an old Hermetic teaching also that I love that you go back to. And Holmes was influenced by ancient teachings of the Hermetic teachings of ancient Egypt. You've probably heard a phrase, as above, so below. And that phrase tends to mean that there is an interplay between the higher ends of the continuum and the lower end of the continuum. That as we think in the higher, as above, so it will be manifested in the below. But the other part of it is as below, so above, recognizing there's an interplay. And that can occur because if our thinking is, I'm ill, I'm poor, I'm lonely, and then we manifest that expression, and then what we get is this expression of it. Sometimes when we're living in stuff, and sometimes things can happen to us that we'd have no clue how it happened, but it just happened, and then we have a reaction to it. And that reaction can be, oh, look, my life is crap and everything is going to hell in a handbasket. And I get this mood swing you're talking about, Shay, where now all of a sudden up into the realms of what we might call the emotional body and the mental bodies, there's a sense of being unhappy or depressed because of what's going on in the worldly affairs. Things that are working in the world of form now are impacting our emotions and our minds. And we're telling ourselves stories about all the stuff that's going on around us. So now the below has impacted the above. And the above is now impacting the below and continuing that cycle of thinking. So how do you break the cycle? How do you break the cycle? And it's to move closer to the divine, like you're getting in your comment. I'm going to jump back over because we were looking at point 8, the last one in the theory. And point 9 starts that whole process about, how to use all this. Once we know all of this, what do we do? Well, it's to, and I'm going to run through these rather rapidly. I'm looking at the clock here. But first off, it says you got to learn to give direction to your thought, because until you know this stuff, your thoughts are like a ping pong all over the place. You think you have no control over stuff. And you're looking at the world, it's ping ponging, and you're ping ponging your thoughts in relation to the world. So you have to begin by giving direction to your thought. And that's one of the first how-tos, and that starts on over on 396. Holmes says, mind as law is helpless without direction. So we got to give direction. The second thing, and what do we mean by that? We mean an intention. What is it you want? You have to think about what is it you want and start having that intention in your mind. That's the direction. A lot of times, if we, there's often an old Bible phrase that says, without a vision, the people perish, to paraphrase it. But what it's saying is, if we don't have a vision of where we're going to go, we're going to have a crappy life. That's what it means by perishing. We have to give direction to our thoughts. So that's the first step in the how-to. Step 11, or point 11, is we got to train our thoughts. So not only give direction, we have to learn how to train our thinking. That is monetary thinking, to start weeding out the thoughts that are inconsistent. If we think I'm well, and then occasionally have I'm sick, how can we weed out the sick thoughts so that we can consider and see our state of wholeness and wellness? So we got to begin training our thoughts. Did I skip a point? I'm going to go back and make sure I didn't. I did. I thought I did. All right. The first one was give direction to our thought. I must have clicked twice here. Second one was to foster a specific mental attention, acceptance, and realization. What does that mean? More and more and more, give mental attention to that which you want. See the good in your life. If you have days where you're feeling better, focus on the days you're feeling better. If you have something that comes and shows prosperity in your life, look at that. When you see you have friends, so foster a specific mental attention to see the things in your life that are already good. Have an acceptance. Acceptance, what does that mean? It means you are accepting and knowing that things are going to come your way, that there is an acceptance of it. So the more you can accept that life is good for you and it's going to give you what it is that you need in this lifetime, what it is that you're desiring, more that you can develop that inner sense of acceptance, the greater your thoughts are going to be oriented in that direction. And finally is what's called realization. Realization is a state that moves between I think this to I know this. That's what realization is. And the more you can realize something, the more I can just realize that health, prosperity, friends, love, jobs, whatever it is I'm desiring or showing up in my life, the more I just not only accept it, it's moving beyond acceptance. First, we're looking at it, we're focusing on that which is already there. Then we're accepting it, just knowing it's going to manifest in our lives. And then it's just a state of realization is occurring. So that's what Holmes says we have to develop. And then from that, we train our thoughts. We start monitoring our thoughts and trying to weed out the ones that aren't in the direction that we want. And the 12th point he gets into is we move from fear to faith, because we walk around believing that we have a fear of life, fear that things aren't going to work out for us. And when we have our fears, oh, I'm going to get sick, or I'm never going to have friends, or I'm never going to get the job I want, or I never am going to have money, or I'm never, a lot of that is a faith in lack. It's a faith that things aren't going to manifest for you. What Holmes is saying is we have to move from a fear of lack, which is a faith of lack, to a faith of goodness, to a faith that things will show up. And Holmes says that the overcome fear, that the opposite of fear is love. The more we can embody and gain a sense of love, the more we can overcome the fears that are keeping us from having the faith that we want to bring about what we express our lives out. And the last thing in how to is, I think it's the last one, there may be one more, is we must develop a conscious knowing and love of God or Spirit. With this, we move from faith to knowing oneness in the good of life. And so this is again on that continuum. We're back to, instead of being stuck in the world of form and seeing the stuff out there as defining our lives, is defining our lives by the highest end of the continuum, where it's oneness and the goodness of life. That up at the level of spirit is a good that can be flowed to us. And when we have faith of that, and know it just built from a sense of, well, I intellectually know to I experience and know God and oneness, the more we can move from it being a theory to a knowingness, the more that we're going to manifest that a world of love and a world where we know that there are no lack. And so finally, we must see ourselves as divine and perfect. This moves us toward our true mystical nature. The interesting thing to me about Science of Mind is a lot of people come to the theory with a sense of, I came because I had a problem in my physical life. It was health. It was a lack of money. It was a lack of friends, lack of whatever lack your human lack was. They come to Science of Mind and they learn the techniques. And at a certain point, the attachment to the forms that first brought them to Science of Mind, whatever that lack was they were trying to fix. Yeah, they fixed it along the way. But at some point, they realized that the particular lack they had been focusing on, in the big scheme of things, wasn't the most important thing in their life. And the most important thing was to shift that conscious awareness to moving into the true mystical nature. Once you've moved to a space where you know that all is one, where you know that life is good for you, where you really recognize and know this at the essence of your soul, that you begin to let go of attachments to things in the world of form that you had attachments to previously. And that transcends the need for a lot of the stuff that maybe was driving our motivations early on our spiritual path. And this brings me to the final point of this whole section, which is many of the pages, as you saw from the first slide, of the whole thing. But what Holmes and what Science of Mind ultimately is about is calling us to do that process of change I just described, to evolve beyond our focus on the world of form and stuff, to really developing our awareness of the oneness of God and our place in that. That's the hero's journey we're all on. We all were born from spirit. We forgot it. We're traveling back. That's the hero's journey. It's told in the Bible over and over. It's told in many movies. Look at the Star Wars movies, so many other movies. They all have that hero story of someone who had the truth and had to go out and explore and experience and then come back. And they know the home much deeper level than they knew it from the first time. And that's what we're doing. And ultimately, this whole thing is a mystical journey that you and I are on. It's a journey from learning how to navigate this world of form and stuff to learning to know our true oneness of all that is. For those of you who jumped into the dialogue, I appreciate that. I am going to show you one more slide here. I've been working on a book, Ernest Holmes at a Solomar, and I encourage you to go check it out. It's on Amazon. And it's a book that I assisted in compiling for the Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, taken a good bit of my time over the last year. And it just recently came out in print about a week ago. And you can go to Amazon or to the CSL, Centers for Spiritual Living website, in their shop page, and either place and order a copy of this book. It's over 400 pages, and it's a compilation of all of Ernest Holmes' talks and lectures from the conference center at Solomar in California in the 1950s. It's not the easiest book, I'll tell you that. It's not an introduction to Science of Mind like we're doing on these Saturday morning conversations, but it is it is his deeper mystical teachings, and really gets at that path that I'm talking about. In that book, you're going to find a lot of his later thinking in life about this mystical journey that we're on, and how to move from fear to love, how to move from the world of the relative to the world of the absolute, how to move from being attached to all the stuff in life, all the forms in life, to moving to the consciousness of knowing goodness in your life. So I thank you for checking that book out, Ernest Holmes at Asilomar. I also want to thank you for watching the video, to coming in this morning and dialoguing with me. And hopefully you got some benefit from it. I encourage you to come back next week when Reverend Robert will cover the same chapter from a different lens, and see how you can take the two and bring them together and really deepen in your awareness of the science of mind. So, Mitch, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the kind comments. So if you want more from me, you can also check out my website, which is consciousbridge.com, consciousbridge.com. There you can find links to my blog writings and links to my YouTube channel and videos. And then from there, you can find links to other talks and things that I do. Last week, I was speaking at the CSL Denver Center and spoke more about that Ernest Holmes book, if you want to hear more about that. Anyway, I want to thank you all for being with us this morning, and for going just a few minutes over on the time. So blessings, and have a great Saturday.